The lie was so simple, it slid off his tongue like it had been waiting there all his life. And yet, by the time it finished echoing through the room, the damage had already been done. Dr. Maya Ellis didn't flinch when she heard it. She didn't gasp, didn't cry, didn't even lean back in her seat. Her lips pressed together, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but inside, she felt the familiar, nauseating churn of disbelief. She had dealt with prejudice before. She had seen it in the quiet refusal of a handshake, in the slow double-take, when people realized the surgeon saving their loved one was a black woman. But this was something different. Across the school board meeting room, Harold Whitman leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped in a parody of sincerity. He was a veteran teacher, 40 years in the classroom, known for his gruff voice and old-school ways. He had once been considered a pillar of the community. Now, with every word, he was chipping away at Maya's life. "I'm telling you," Harold said, his voice steady. "I saw her. In the supply room. Stealing medication. She put it in her bag, then left like nothing happened." A ripple moved through the room. Parents, board members, a few scattered students. They shifted, whispered, frowned. The superintendent glanced from Harold to Maya, his eyes clouded with the careful neutrality of a man who had no intention of taking sides publicly. Maya's pulse thudded in her ears. This was absurd. She wasn't even employed by the school. She had been volunteering at the school's health clinic, offering free checkups for low-income students. She had never stolen anything in her life. The supply room Harold claimed to have seen her in? She hadn't even been near it. But she also knew how it worked. The accusation came first. The truth always lagged behind. The weeks leading up to that night had been unremarkable. Maya had finished her hospital shifts, driven to Lincoln High twice a week, and run health screenings for kids whose parents couldn't afford regular care. Some had asthma and didn't know it. Some needed glasses but had been struggling for years without them. Maya loved the work. It reminded her of why she became a doctor in the first place. Harold had barely spoken to her. When he did, it was curt, perfunctory. She noticed the way his eyes lingered just a moment too long when she passed in the hallway. Not admiring Lino, it was something else. Measuring. Judging. It wasn't until she overheard him in the teacher's lounge one afternoon that she understood. "They're letting anyone in here now," he muttered to another teacher, not realizing Maya was just around the corner. One day it's volunteers from God knows where. Next day it's a clinic full of. He'd stopped when he saw her walk in. She hadn't called him out. Maybe she should have. Now, as Harold's words poisoned the air of the meeting, Maya could feel the unspoken verdict forming in the room. Not guilty or innocent. Not truth or falsehood. But the dangerous in-between, doubt. The superintendent cleared his throat. "Dr. Ellis, do you have a response to this accusation?" Maya stood slowly, feeling every eye on her. Her voice, when it came, was calm, measured. "Yes. My response is that Mr. Whitman is lying." The silence that followed was heavier than the accusation itself. She knew the rules of these moments. A black woman defending herself was always angry, aggressive, or emotional. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to keep her tone even. "I was never in the supply room. I have no reason to take anything from this school. I volunteer my time and my own supplies because these students deserve care. What you've just heard is a fabrication." Harold gave a short, derisive laugh. "So now I'm the liar?" "Yes," Maya said, and she didn't look away. What happened next wasn't a dramatic gavel bang or a sudden confession. It was worse. The meeting ended in a fog of murmurs and half-promises to look into it. People avoided her eyes as they filed out. A few parents whispered to each other, glancing at her like she was a dangerous animal in a cage. The fallout began the next day. Her hospital administrator called her into the office. The school had filed a report with the hospital board. Pending investigation, she was suspended from volunteer work at all district schools. Within a week, local news stations were circling the story. They didn't say she was guilty. They didn't have to. The words "black doctor accused" did the work for them. Her friends told her to stay quiet, let it blow over. But Maya knew better. Lies didn't blow over. They spread, they took root, they hardened into something like fact. And Harold? He seemed to glow with renewed self-importance. He started dropping hints to colleagues about the kind of people who were being let into their schools. At the grocery store, Maya caught him talking to a group of parents, their heads leaning in as he whispered, That was the moment she decided she wouldn't wait for the truth to clear her name. She was going to burn his lie to the ground. The first step was finding proof. Not belief. Not character witnesses. Proof. And Maya knew just where to start. Maya started with the clinic's security footage. Lincoln High's health wing was small: 2 exam rooms, a supply closet, and a narrow waiting area, but it had one advantage Harold hadn't counted on. 2 security cameras, one facing the main hallway, another angled toward the clinic entrance. The school's office manager, Mrs. Porter, was the gatekeeper to everything: attendance records, schedules, and, if you asked politely enough, camera access. Maya knew she wouldn't get anywhere walking in as an accuser. She had to walk in as a colleague. "Morning, Mrs. Porter," Maya said, stepping into the cramped office. The woman didn't look up from her computer. "I heard about the meeting." Her voice was neutral in the way people get when they've already picked a side. "I know. That's why I'm here. I need to review the clinic's security footage from last Thursday." Mrs. Porter's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Only the principal can approve that." "I'm not asking for anything private," Maya pressed. "Just the hour window when Harold claims he saw me. That's still not something I can." "Maya," a voice called from the doorway. She turned to see Jordan Kim, the school's IT coordinator, leaning against the doorframe with a cup of coffee. He was mid-20s, sharp-eyed, and had a reputation for knowing more about the school's systems than the principal himself. "You need the footage?" Jordan asked casually. Mrs. Porter's mouth tightened. "Jordan, it's fine, Marcy. I'll handle it." He motioned for Maya to follow him. In the IT room, Jordan pulled up a split-screen feed from the date in question. "So, Harold says he saw you go into the supply room at what time?" "About 3:15 p.m., Maya said. Jordan scrubbed through the footage. They watched students trickle in and out, the school nurse walking past with a clipboard, a custodian pushing a mop bucket. At exactly 3:14, Maya appeared walking down the hallway toward the clinic with her bag slung over her shoulder. She stepped inside, greeted the nurse, and walked straight into exam room 1. "Supply room's the other way," Jordan noted. "Exactly," Maya said. They fast-forwarded. She came out of the exam room 20 minutes later with a small boy clutching an inhaler. They left together. She never even glanced toward the supply room. Jordan whistled low. "This completely kills his story." "Yes," Maya said, "if we can get it into the right hands." Jordan burned the clip to a USB drive. "Careful. Once Harold realizes you've got this, he'll come at you harder. Guys like him don't back down, they double down." Maya pocketed the drive. "Let him. I'm done playing defense." That night, Maya called her friend, attorney Rebecca Ortiz. Rebecca specialized in civil rights cases, and she didn't waste time sugarcoating things. "This isn't just about clearing your name," Rebecca said after watching the footage. "This is a textbook case of defamation and racial bias. If you want to take him down, we do it publicly. Lawsuit, media, the works." Maya hesitated. "Won't that make me look vindictive?" Rebecca's eyebrows shot up. "He accused you of stealing. He jeopardized your career. You don't owe him dignity." Word spread faster than Maya expected. Within a week, local journalists were calling. At first, she declined interviews. Then one reporter, Angela Price, said something that made her stop. "Dr. Ellis, I've covered these kinds of stories before. If you stay quiet, the public narrative belongs to him. If you speak, you take it back." So Maya spoke. Calmly, precisely, on record. She explained the timeline, the footage, the lie. She didn't use words like racist or bigot. She let the facts hang there, daring people to connect them. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. By noon, the school district's PR department was in panic mode. Parents flooded social media with outrage. A few defended Harold, saying he was old-fashioned, but not malicious. But more questioned why the district had acted on an accusation without evidence. Harold went silent. For 3 days. On the 4th, he showed up on the steps of City Hall with his own lawyer, giving a press conference about false allegations of racism against him. He painted himself as the victim of a personal vendetta by a media-hungry doctor. Watching from her kitchen, Maya almost laughed. It was so transparent, so clumsy, it would have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. Because she knew that in the eyes of certain people, his words would stick. The district scheduled a formal hearing to review Harold's conduct. Rebecca insisted Maya attend, armed with the footage and a written statement. The hearing room was smaller than she'd imagined, no more than 20 seats for the public. a long table for the board members, and 2 smaller tables for the parties involved. Harold sat across from her, his jaw tight, his knuckles white around a legal pad. When it was his turn, Harold repeated his claim. His voice wavered slightly now, but he stuck to the script. He had seen her take medication from the supply room. Then it was Maya's turn. She plugged in the USB, and the footage filled the projection screen. The board watched silently as the minutes ticked by her entering the clinic, going directly into exam room 1, leaving with the boy, never touching the supply room door. When the clip ended, Maya said simply, "That's the truth." No one spoke for a moment. Then one board member, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, asked Harold, "Mr. Whitman, how do you explain this?" Harold opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "Maybe she went in after the camera stopped recording." Jordan, seated in the back, spoke up. "Those cameras run continuously. There's no gap." The room shifted. The smell of blood in the water. The board voted unanimously to terminate Harold's employment. It should have felt like victory. But as Maya walked out into the bright afternoon, she felt the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her. She had won, yes, but the lie had already cost her time, energy, reputation, and it had left a stain she knew some people would never let go. Rebecca joined her on the steps. "You could end it here, or we take this to court and make it public record. That way, the next person he tries this on won't have to fight so hard." Maya looked out over the reporters gathering at the bottom of the stairs. Harold's career was over. But the deeper problem, the quiet, persistent way prejudice could twist the truth, was still out there. She squared her shoulders. "File the lawsuit." Rebecca smiled grimly. "Good. Let's make it so he never forgets the cost of lying." That night, Maya sat alone in her living room, the USB drive on the table beside her. She thought about every student she'd treated at Lincoln High, every parent who had thanked her, every sideways glance she'd endured. She thought about Harold, how quickly he'd chosen to weaponize a stereotype against her, how easily people had believed it. And she realized something chilling. Harold wasn't unique. He was just the one who got caught. The trial would be months away. The headlines would fade, then flare up again. And through it all, Maya would keep working, keep showing up in places where people like Harold didn't expect to see her. Because sometimes the best revenge wasn't just proving them wrong. It was refusing to disappear. The first thing Rebecca told her was that lawsuits weren't about justice. They were about leverage. "If we walk into that courtroom without understanding Harold's weaknesses, we're just playing defense again," Rebecca said, pacing in front of Maya's kitchen island. "We need more than the footage. We need a pattern, a history." Maya leaned back in her chair. "You think he's done this before?" Rebecca smiled without humor. "People like Harold don't make up lies like that out of nowhere. They've been practicing." They started digging. Rebecca hired a private investigator, a wiry man named Cal with the permanent squint of someone who had spent too much time watching other people's lives through a camera lens. Within a week, Cal had a list of names: former colleagues, students, even parents who had either clashed with Harold or been on the receiving end of his suspicions. One name stood out: Dana Howard, a former teacher who had left Lincoln High 3 years ago under what the district called mutual agreement. Cal tracked her down in a neighboring city, working at a tutoring center. "I know why you're here," Dana said the moment they sat down in a cafe. "And yes, Harold Whitman is a liar." She told them about a time Harold had accused a Latino student of cheating on a standardized test without a shred of proof. The boy had been suspended, missed the test retake, and ended up repeating the grade. "I complained to the principal," Dana said. "Next thing I know, Harold's telling people I was covering for the kid because I was trying to push diversity." Her mouth twisted. "It's always like that with him. He doesn't just accuse, he frames it in a way that plays to people's worst assumptions." Rebecca scribbled notes furiously. "Would you testify?" Dana didn't hesitate. "Gladly." By the time the court date arrived, Rebecca had built a file thick enough to break a stapler. It wasn't just the footage. It was years of quiet destruction, lives and reputations Harold had chipped away at with the same smug confidence he'd tried to use on Maya. The courthouse was packed on the first day of the trial. News vans lined the curb. Protesters stood on the steps, some holding signs supporting Maya, others waving vague slogans about protecting our educators. Inside, Maya sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across from her, Harold looked smaller than she remembered, pale, heavy under the fluorescent lights. but his eyes still held that glint, that refusal to concede even an inch. Opening statements set the tone. Rebecca's voice was steady, deliberate. This is a case about truth. About what happens when a man with influence chooses to weaponize a lie against a woman who has done nothing but serve her community, and about how that lie rooted in bias nearly destroyed her career. Harold's attorney, a sharp-featured man named Collins, took a different tack. This is not about race. This is about a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a woman who seeks attention and monetary gain. He gestured to the jury. We will show that Mr. Whitman had reasonable cause to believe what he saw. We will show that this lawsuit is nothing more than an attempt to ruin him for an honest mistake. Maya kept her face still, but her stomach tightened. An honest mistake. She'd heard those words before. They were the escape hatch for every lie that got too close to the truth. The first witness was Jordan Kim. He explained the security camera system, the unbroken footage, and exactly why Harold's version of events couldn't have happened. Collins tried to poke holes, suggesting the footage could have been tampered with. Jordan didn't blink. Tampering would leave a timestamp discrepancy. There isn't one. This footage is clean. Next came Dana Howard. Her testimony landed like a body blow. She detailed Harold's accusations against the Latino student, the way he had twisted the narrative to imply criminality where there was none. Did you notice any patterns in who Mr. Whitman accused? Rebecca asked. Dana's answer was measured but devastating. Yes, they were almost always people of color, and almost always people he viewed as outsiders. By the third day, the trial had shifted. The press coverage moved from he said, she said to pattern of bias. Collins grew more aggressive, objecting to testimony, accusing Rebecca of trying to smear Harold's reputation with unrelated incidents. When Harold finally took the stand, his composure cracked. Collins guided him through his version of events. Harold claimed he'd been concerned about missing medication for students, that he'd acted out of a sense of duty. But when Rebecca cross-examined, the cracks widened. Mr. Whitman, you testified that you saw Dr. Ellis remove items from the supply room at approximately 3:15 p.m., correct? Yes. Rebecca clicked the remote. The footage appeared on the courtroom screen again. Please point out where, in this video, Dr. Ellis enters the supply room. Harold shifted in his seat. It's not visible from this angle. That's correct, Rebecca said smoothly. Because she never went there. Isn't it true that your entire accusation is based not on what you saw, but on what you assumed? I know what I saw, Harold snapped. No, Mr. Whitman. You know what you wanted others to believe. The final blow came from an unexpected source, a parent named Lillian Price. She had contacted Rebecca's office mid-trial, offering to testify. 2 years earlier, Harold had accused her son, then a freshman, of stealing a teacher's phone. The phone was later found in the teacher's own car, but by then her son had been suspended for 3 days and missed a championship basketball game. It broke something in him, Lillian said on the stand, her voice trembling. He was never the same after that, and Harold never apologized. By the time she stepped down, the jury was no longer looking at Harold with sympathy. Closing arguments were brief. Rebecca reminded the jury that truth wasn't negotiable, and that allowing lies like Harold's to go unpunished only ensured they would be used again. Collins tried to paint Harold as an imperfect but well-meaning man who had made a single error in judgment. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was steady. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Maya Ellis, and award damages in the amount of $1.2 million. The courtroom erupted, reporters scrambling, people murmuring, Harold sinking into his chair. Maya sat very still, the number barely registering. It wasn't about the money. It was about the record. The truth was now permanent. Outside, the cameras waited. Rebecca stood beside her as she gave a brief statement. This case was never about revenge, Maya said into the microphones. It was about accountability, and about making sure the next person who thinks they can destroy a life with a lie knows there will be consequences. She turned and walked down the courthouse steps, the crowd parting around her. Harold remained inside, his career and reputation reduced to the cautionary tale she knew they deserved to be. That night, Maya returned to the hospital for the first time in weeks. The staff greeted her with quiet smiles, nods, and the occasional pat on the arm. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was acknowledgement. As she scrubbed in for surgery, She felt lighter than she had since that first meeting in the school boardroom. The lie had been buried, and Harold Whitman was buried with it. The verdict echoed far beyond the courthouse walls. Within 48 hours, Harold Whitman's name was stripped from the district's staff directory. His pension was frozen pending an internal review. Parents who had once nodded politely to him in the grocery store now looked through him as though he were a ghost. It didn't stop there. Old stories began to surface, things people had whispered about for years but never said aloud. Former students spoke out on social media, describing moments when Harold had embarrassed them in front of their peers, accused them of cheating, or treated them as though they didn't belong in his classroom. Some of the accounts were decades old. Others were fresh enough to sting. Together, they formed a portrait not of a man who made one mistake, but of a man who had spent his career wielding suspicion like a weapon. Maya didn't celebrate in the way people expected. There were no champagne toasts, no victory dinners. She kept working her shifts at the hospital, volunteering at the free clinic on weekends. Winning had cleared her name. Yes, but it had also shown her just how fragile a name could be. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages. Some were from strangers, people thanking her for standing up, for not letting Harold's lie disappear into silence. Others were from reporters asking for more interviews. She declined most of them. The story wasn't about fame. It was about permanence. And permanence had been achieved. The court record was public. Anyone who searched Harold's name would see the truth first. 2 weeks after the trial, Maya was walking through the hospital lobby when she saw a familiar face. It was Jordan Kim, the IT coordinator from Lincoln High, holding a manila envelope. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing it over. Inside was a printed still from the security footage, the frame showing her stepping out of exam room 1 with the young boy clutching his inhaler. On the bottom, in Jordan's neat handwriting, was a single line. "Facts are louder than lies." Maya smiled. "Thank you. For everything." Jordan shrugged. "You didn't need me. You just needed proof. And you made sure everyone saw it." The school district quietly announced a new policy that any accusation against a volunteer or staff member would require corroborating evidence before action could be taken. They didn't mention Maya by name, but she knew where the change had come from. More surprising was the ripple effect among the students. A few weeks after the verdict, she received a letter from a senior at Lincoln High. The handwriting was jagged, the ink smudged in places. "Dr. Ellis, I just wanted to say thank you. My friends and I saw what happened, and it made me think about all the times we didn't speak up when something was wrong. You showed us we can." As for Harold, he vanished from public life. Rebecca forwarded Maya an email from a journalist who had tried to contact him for a follow-up piece. The message was curt. "No comment. Stop contacting me." Rumor had it he'd tried to get a job at a private school 2 counties over. But in the age of Google, his name came with baggage no resume could offset. The same voice that had once carried weight in school board meetings now carried nothing at all. One evening, months later, Maya was leaving the hospital when she saw a figure sitting on a bench near the parking lot. It took a moment to recognize him. Harold looked older, thinner, his hair unkempt. He was staring at the ground, hands clasped loosely between his knees. She could have walked past, pretended not to see him, but something in her refused to let the moment slip away. "Mr. Whitman," she said. His head jerked up. For a second, his eyes flared with the old defiance. Then it was gone, replaced by something smaller. "Maya," his voice was hoarse. "I didn't think you'd speak to me. I didn't think you'd be here," she replied. He let out a long breath. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "Yes, you did," she said quietly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. And you thought people would believe you because they always have." He flinched. "I lost everything." "You threw it away," she corrected. "You lied because you could, and now you can't." She waited for him to argue. He didn't. He just looked down again. "Goodbye, Mr. Whitman," she said, and walked away. That night, Maya sat at her kitchen table, the still frame from the security footage propped against the wall. She thought about how quickly a life could tilt off its axis, how fragile trust was, how easily it could be stolen. But she also thought about the people who had stood beside her: Jordan, Rebecca, Dana, even strangers who had chosen to believe the truth when it mattered most. She realized something then. The lie had been Harold's weapon, but the truth had been her army. And in the end, it hadn't just cleared her, it had exposed him for what he was. A year later, she was back at Lincoln High for a health fair. Students lined up for blood pressure checks and vision screenings. The new principal, a warm woman named Carla Jennings, greeted her with a hug. "We're so glad you came back," Carla said. "The kids need to see you here. To know that what happened didn't drive you away." "It takes more than a lie to scare me off," Maya said. As she packed up at the end of the day, a young boy approached her table. He was maybe 12, wearing a too-big hoodie and clutching a basketball. "You're Dr. Ellis, right?" he asked. She nodded. "That's me. My sister told me what you did. How you didn't let that guy ruin you." He hesitated. "That was cool." Maya smiled. "Thank you. But you know what's even cooler? Standing up for yourself and for other people when it's hard." He nodded solemnly, as if storing the advice away for later. As she walked to her car, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold, Maya felt a quiet peace settle over her. The lie had been buried. The man who told it had been buried with it. But the truth, her truth, was alive, carried forward in the minds of every person who had seen it and chosen to believe. And that was something no one could take away. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.